Alright, so we're doing the warm-up long division. Let me zoom in so we can see this. Okay, so here we are. So basically we are dividing this polynomial by n plus 1, and the method we learned was long division. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and write this out. So this polynomial n cubed plus 3n square minus 6n minus 17 is to be divided by n plus 1. Everybody good? First step is good? Alright. So how do you do this? You basically, step number 1, I'm just going to write down the steps also so it's kind of you have some clarity. Step number 1 is you compare, you want to basically see n cubed by n. You're basically comparing n and n cubed. What do I multiply by n so that I can get n cubed? Your goal is to write n cubed here. So you only compare the first terms. So you compare n with n cubed. So what do I multiply by n to get n cubed? Or the other way of saying this is n cubed divided by n is n square. If I write n square here, n square times n is n cubed, so I get my goal, right? So step number 2, you multiply. So you do n square times, but you multiply to both the terms. You multiply n square times n, so you multiply n square to n plus 1. So what do you get here? N square multiplied by n is n cubed. N square times 1 is n square. So you have to make sure that when you multiply and write it down, when you multiply and write it down, you want to write the like terms below each other. You want to write the like terms below each other. And then what do you do? What do you do to this? The term that you brought down, what do you do to that? What's the next step in long division? Subtract. Perfect. Someone said that. Awesome. So you subtract. How do you subtract? The easiest way to subtract, I tell my students, is to just change the signs, especially because there are multiple terms. So positive n cubed becomes negative n cubed. Positive n square becomes negative n square. So n cubed and n cubed cancels out. That is your goal. You have to reduce every term one at a time. And then this is 3n square minus n square. So this becomes 2n square, and then you bring down both the other steps. Once you have subtracted, you bring down the remaining terms and do the process again. Do the process again. So what's the next process? You compare the first term and the first term. What do you multiply by n to get 2n square? First of all, I need a 2 because you want 2n square, and there's only one n, so you want another n. Or another way to look at this is 2n square divided by n is 2n. So 2n times, then you multiply. So compare the first term and figure out what term. Next is multiply. You multiply 2n with n plus 1. So 2n times n plus 1 gives you what? 2n times n is 2n squared. That's your whole goal. And then 2n times 1 is 2n. Everybody okay? And then subtract. So when you subtract, you change the signs for both. This becomes negative, this also becomes negative. So let's see what we have. 2n square cancels out, and then negative 6n, negative 2n is negative 8n. And then bring it down and repeat the process again, and repeat the process again. Again, you're comparing the first term with the first term. What do I multiply by n to get negative 8n? Negative 8. Negative 8 times n is negative 8n. So basically you're multiplying negative 8 with n plus 1. And negative 8n, and negative 8 times 1 is negative 8. Subtract. Subtract basically means this becomes positive and this also becomes positive. So these two cancel out, and negative 17 plus 8, this now becomes a positive, negative 9. Now you can't do anything because the power of this is less than this, so you can't divide. So this is your remainder. But how do you write? Yeah, yes, go ahead, Dominic.
So if it's if it's subtraction, like when you're subtracting under there and it's already a negative number, you change it back to a positive?
Yeah, because that's what you do in subtraction. Exactly. You just change the signs. Because subtraction always means just changing the sign of the other one. Exactly. Absolutely. So how do you write the whole thing? How do you write your quotient? We'll write the quotient, but whenever you have a remainder, this is your quotient, but this is not the only quotient. You take this quotient and you write it as, you also have to add the negative 9. So it's negative 9 over the divisor. So n plus 1. So this is your final answer. So if you want to write the whole answer here, it's going to be n squared plus 2n minus 8 minus 9 over n plus 1. It's normally plus whatever the remainder is, but in this case it's negative. So it's negative 9 and n plus 1. Is everybody clear?